Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. My name is Caroline Colas, and I'm the Senior Director of Health and Wellness at the Marlene Meyerson JCC Manhattan, and your moderator for the Positive Psychology Hour. Today, we're going to be talking about unlocking the power of story to connect and engage with Jude Treder Wolff, who is a licensed clinical social worker and an improv um, collaborator, director, artist extraordinaire. Whether it is given a toast at a family celebration, presenting at work, or engaging in friendly banter, storytelling is a compelling tool to communicate and to connect with both ourselves and one another. Today, we're going to learn how to express ourselves in a way that helps others understand an issue or an important piece of information. We're going to discover how to structure our message, use emotion to connect, and even share a life experience or struggle in a way that makes us feel less alone. We're going to receive practical tips to become an effective and engaging speaker so that we can connect authentically with the people in our lives, whether that's in a close relationship or in a group or even for a presentation. Storytelling is powerful, and it's a healing way to process and experience ourselves and one another. Through storytelling, we can also share a perspective that may be of help to someone else who's going through a similar challenge and may provide them with inspiration. So, when we discover how to structure our message and we use emotion to connect and we share a life experience, we answer the question, why care? This creative process can be a remarkable, effective way to shape our own narrative and reframe experiences that we have, and also just complete a circle of a life experience. Jude Treder Wolff is a licensed clinical social worker, certified group psychotherapist, certified practitioner of applied improvisation, a creative arts therapist with over 30 years of experience as a clinician and trainer in the fields of mental health, addiction, and wellness. Jude, welcome to the call. Thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you for having me, and thank you for allowing me to talk about a topic that I think is so important for our times and so important for our lives. We are living stories all the time, and we don't always know the wealth that is in us that we can share with other people. And sometimes the path to discovering that wealth that is within us, the richness, the depth of us, is discovering it can happen through discovering stories, or for just getting the art of the story, learning how it works. How do we mine our own life for stories? How do we discover the what really has meaning for us? And in that process, we are empowered to share ourselves in a way in the world that we may not have if we didn't have that storytelling skill. I love this quote by Kierkegaard, the philosopher, where he says, life has to be lived forward and understood backward. Now, I'm an improviser and a storyteller. To me, improv is living forward. Improv is being in the moment, making choices moment to moment, and not knowing how things are going to turn out because you're in the play, you're in the action of it all. And the choices we make build on our fellow players' choices, and we create moments and stories going forward. So improv is living forward. Storytelling is understanding backward. Storytelling is looking at things that have already happened, we've already been through them, and processing them in a way that allows us to examine them, understand ourselves, and embrace our humanity through really coming to terms with what has already happened. And the art of story is in finding a way to share about that, if we choose to, in a way that is artful and impacts the listener in a powerful way. So in this 1 hour talk today, and some of it is interactive, I hope, through the chat and maybe through people popping on and answering a question with Carolina or Wendy's help, if somebody wants to say something in response to some prompts we're going to get to in a little bit. So this 1 hour talk isn't really going to get so much into the design of a story or the arc, the narrative arc of stories, because that is a little bit more complex, and I don't know that we could do justice to it. We're going to talk about the why of storytelling in terms of wellness, resilience, embracing ourselves and self-knowledge and growth, and also a little bit of the how and the why. If you really want to get into this working on a story, it's a wonderful idea to take a storytelling class where you have a chance to work on a piece, share it with people, get feedback, and gain some creative confidence that way. So to get started, I just want to share a couple of slides with you. To get started, I want to do this. I want to share a couple of slides. I just said that. Now I'm repeating it. Not great for storytelling. And then I want to share a brief story of my own, and then we're going to go process that a little bit in the chat, because I will use my own stories because of it's. I know them really well. I'm teaching about using true stories of our own, and they illustrate different kinds of points. And rather than trying to draw out stories from the group that we won't have time for, I'm going to use truncated versions of stories that I've done professionally. But before we get into the first one of those that has a specific goal, I'm going to just share a couple of slides with you. Share screen. Wait, are you looking? Can you? Oh, great. Can you see that? Oh, unlocking the power of story, connect and engage. All right. So next slide. Where are you? Stories are always about some kind of shift or a transformation. And this is the difference between an anecdote and a story. An anecdote, let's take the Wizard of Oz for an example. In the Wizard of Oz, the anecdote would be a young girl lives on a farm in Kansas. She's lonely. Her dog gets taken from her. She goes after the dog, runs away from home. A storm comes, and then she ends up having to go right back. That's the bare bones of that. The story is about a young girl who really believes there's something special somewhere that she's not a part of, someplace over the rainbow that she's longing for, where she'll be understood, where she will have the things that she lacks in the home that she's in, where she feels so lonely and misunderstood. Her dog runs away. The one being that she truly feels love and understanding with, she goes after the dog, and she's away from home when a storm hits and destroys her house, and she lands in a completely unfamiliar world where she has to navigate her way back without knowing what's going to happen next. And through this, she discovers courage, she discovers friendship, she discovers community. And in the very end, she realizes that what she's been longing for is actually home, where she's been all along. And it's inside of herself, not outside of herself, that she has to find peace and resolution to her longing. So the transformation for Dorothy is a long arc of experience, and that story is what makes us feel like it matters. That's true in all of our stories as well. It can be a very subtle shift, but it's in the telling of it that we get the arc of meaning, the arc of a struggle that makes us relate to it. We create our lives through narratives, and how we tell the story determines our sense of self. The narrative that we tell about a struggle, an obstacle, oppression, can name the obstacle, it can name the oppressive system, it can name those persecution or genuine hurt or trauma. And at the same time, we can tell a narrative that makes ourselves the hero of our own story. And through focusing on what rises up in us in response to a challenge, an obstacle, a pain, or something that we want to celebrate in ourselves. Stories aren't only about the bad things, but the story of even celebrating something in ourselves that is a gift is somehow going to be really powerful by a narrative embracing what were the obstacles to that happy ending. But how we shape our narrative is something that we can control, even when forces outside our life we cannot control. Our life is a story that is still being written if we're alive. Our story has many chapters. And within each of these chapters, there are scenes and there are moments. And these scenes and these moments have a beginning, a middle, and an end. We set up a story with who we are at the beginning. The arc of the story is what we go through, and who we are at the end is, in many ways, well, that's the transformational shift. It's the start of a new chapter. The art of storytelling, or the craft, is the way that we frame obstacles and problems and make a real hero's journey out of it, of the struggle to change, to heal, to grow, to find meaning in pain, and to gain perspective on suffering. When I work with people in storytelling coaching, I cannot tell you how many times the facts of the story, the bare bones of the story, is masking a great deal of depth that it's only in using the craft of story that somebody gets in touch with what they've been carrying around in terms of pain, but also in terms of their inner wealth and in terms of their inner strength. We can shape our own narrative by elevating our own experience and by learning the art of story. And it can be a pathway for healing, post-traumatic growth, social connection, and general well-being. What's my next slide? Oh, you can barely see it. Okay. All right, I'm going to stop sharing, and I want to share a story with you, and then we're going to have a little discussion in the chat. I'm going to give you, this will be about a 5-minute story that I've actually told a much longer version of. I want to share 2 stories of my own in particular. One is much shorter later on, but 2 different kinds of stories. And this one I've used professionally quite a lot, but I've also used it in storytelling shows. And I want to explain why afterward. But first, I'll just share it with you, and then we'll talk about universal meanings. But the first thing is that we want to find the universal meaning in a personal struggle. And I'll start with this. So it's St. Patrick's Day in 1982, and it's a Friday, and it's rush hour, and it's been raining in New York City for 3 days. So that the sludge of traffic, the general sense of just frustration of New York City driving is everywhere. And I'm inching down 9th Avenue in my 1974 Buick Apollo on my way to my night job, my 3rd of 3 jobs at Daughters of Israel Nursing Home in West Orange, New Jersey, not far from my apartment in West Orange, New Jersey. I know I'm going to be late because the traffic is just like molasses, and everybody's so cranky because of it. I spend a lot of time in my car because I have 3 jobs, and I feel about my car the way I feel about my relationship. It's got a lot of miles on it, and it's keeping me going. But it's also always breaking down. Often. It's often breaking down. But the reason I'm in my car so much is because I work 3 jobs, because I landed in New Jersey for an internship, a music therapy internship, about 8 months before this date, after coming from Australia, where I had this 6-month love affair with this Australian guy that I ended up having to come back from my internship. And all I do is try to get back to Australia to be with him, because even though it didn't work with us, I believe, and he believes, that we just didn't have enough time. That if we just had more time, we could make it work. Everything that didn't work, we can fix. Now we know what the problems are. So I just work all the time, trying to make enough money to get myself together and get back to Australia and to be with him. And so here I am halfway through the Lincoln Tunnel on rush hour on St. Patrick's Day, and my car stops. It won't go. And I don't know what's wrong with it. I get out of my car in the Lincoln Tunnel, and now all the New Yorkers are screaming at me because everyone is stopped in both lanes. They're stopped, and they're cursing at me and giving me the finger. And I'm from Wisconsin, so I feel very apologetic. I stand in the middle of the Lincoln Tunnel, which is this like gigantic garage, echoey garage. And I say, "I'm so sorry. I don't know what's wrong. It won't go. I don't know what the problem is. It won't move." And people are cursing at me. And then I look up and I see this thing that crawling along the side of the Lincoln Tunnel. And there's a person in a little device, looks like a creepy crawler on the side of the Lincoln Tunnel. And I hear this: "Return to your vehicle, and we will tow your vehicle out of the Lincoln Tunnel." And I get in the vehicle, and they attach this towing thing and tow me to the Jersey side of the Lincoln Tunnel back into the torrential rain and dumped my car at the end of the Lincoln Tunnel. And now people are passing me and they're still cursing me and giving me the finger because I believe now people as far as West 79th Street are going to be in traffic now for the rest of the night because of me. And I feel so guilty. But I have $7. I have a checkbook with maybe $150 in my account and nothing else. I don't have a credit card. I don't have a AAA card. I don't even have anybody to call because I haven't really made any connections here on the East Coast with somebody who's willing to come out in rush hour on St. Patrick's Day in the torrential rain to rescue me. So now I start going through the yellow pages, trying to find a garage or a towing service that will get me out of this jam, that will take a check that is still open on St. Patrick's Day. Nobody answers the phone. If they do answer the phone, they don't take checks or they're already closed. So I begin to get hysterical. I begin to think I'm going to have to live in my car and eat my upholstery. I get a guy on the phone who's still open and he says, yeah. And I say, I was talking about the Lincoln Tunnel and you can't leave me here. Please don't hang up. Please don't hang up. You can't abandon me here. He says, where are you? Excuse me. Allergies. And he says, all right, lady, we'll come and get you. Excuse me. I feel really, but I haven't asked him if he takes checks. It doesn't matter. I'll beg him. I'll cry. I'll plead. I know that's what I'll have to do. Well, I think I'm gonna have to wait in my car for hours because all I can see on the Jersey side are headlights. But within 20 minutes, out of the clouds and the rain bursts light and the cabin of a giant service truck. Like an angel, this man is looking down on me. Whoa! And he jumps out of the car and he says, hop out, lady. And he tows my car and it's hanging there from the winch like a landed marlin. And I get into the cabin of the car, of the truck, and I say, oh my God, thank you so much for coming out and helping me. And he says, oh yeah, on a night like this is pretty bad. It's pretty bad. And we get to my apartment and he says, well, thank God I was still there. You're safe, you're home. I go to pay him with a check. He's a little hesitant, but what is he gonna do? And he looks at my check and my driver's license and he says, I don't know if I can accept this check. And I instantly feel panicked. And I go, of course you can accept the check. Of course you can accept the check. It's a good check. And he goes, well, this check is from Apple Bank in New York. Your address is New Jersey, but your license is from Wisconsin. And I realized, whoa, I really, really messed up here. I didn't ever get a New Jersey driver's license because I don't really feel like I live here. And so I feel the panic rising up. And I go, please take the check. Please take the check. It's perfectly good. You can keep my car. You're like, okay, all right, lady. Okay. I go in my apartment. I'm safe. I figure whatever is going on here, I got to get my act together. Well, my car gets back on the road. He fixes it. And when I go to the DMV the following Monday morning to surrender my Wisconsin driver's license for a New Jersey license, I feel waves and waves of grief and loss. And I know that I'm never going back to Australia, that this is all a delusion just to avoid facing how lonely I am out here, how hard it is to be here, how hard it is to get over a relationship, and that me not being grounded and present in my life in New Jersey has actually cost me so much more than just giving up on a relationship that never worked. And that day I go to AAA and I get a AAA card, an account. I register for a Visa card. And I think, if I do start dating again, I'll probably have to start seeing a mechanic. So that's my story. I hope I didn't go longer than 5 minutes. My voice gave out a little bit in the middle. So this story is about my flaws, my struggle, and some obstacles that I was facing at the time. So I wonder if you could just put in the chat, what are some of the universal themes that you hear in a story like that? And universal themes are things like need for love, belonging, search for identity, dealing with change. Let's see if there's anybody put anything in the obstacle. Yes, coming to terms with where you are in life, problem solving. We are all human, absolutely. Some people are more practical than others. Obstacles to your goal, abandonment, and a need. Oh, I love this. Yes, the need for community and to find friends where you live and to stop running from yourself. Yes, absolutely. Lessons learned, stop running from yourself. These are all universal themes that an individual story can bring out. And you have to be a little bit vulnerable to tell a story like that. And I'm okay with it. I've told that story in many, many settings professionally, because it also deals with when you're dealing with addiction, for example, and you have to give up one way of life for another way of life. You can feel very lost for a while. You can feel like you don't have the skills. And that story kind of humanizes that struggle. We have to give up one thing to embrace a new way of life. There are many other universal struggles, sometimes systemic issues, dealing with institutions, dealing with government, dealing with family dynamics. Those are also universal. And to always make ourselves the central character in the story so that our own struggle, even if there's a bad guy in the story, that's another person. Like in this relationship, I wouldn't say my ex was a bad guy. I mean, we were equally not right for each other. No one was a bad guy, but I have to be at the center of my own story. See if this is a chat thing I should check out. Oh, thank you. All right, so I wanted to share that story because that's a story that you could use for many different purposes, professionally, as in a presentation where you're dealing with change and helping people embrace the idea that we need to get a lot of skills and a lot of things in place to make change happen, to make it land, to make ourselves feel somewhat secure in unfamiliar territory. So let's go back to any thoughts or comments, Caroline, do you want to say, or should we just?
I was just thinking, how we are with ourselves all the time, and the stories that we tell ourselves about who we are and how we face whatever challenges are part of the human condition too. And to use growth mindset to actually reframe it so that it is an empowerment, everything the mistakes that we make. I'm just thinking of self-compassion and all of the micro
Yes,
practices that we employ in positive psychology and how they essentially help frame the narrative so that we are moving towards resilience, towards
exactly. Yeah.
perseverance, towards being able to learn from anything and change that lesson to a learning. And it just strikes me that that is what a lot of what you do is just growth mindset work.
It really is. It's about taking that set of truths or facts and framing them in a way that says, how could I grow? How did I grow? And how can I still grow? Having faced my own flaws, foibles, floundering, and failures. Those are the best stories, honestly, is facing those things in ourselves with a mindset that I'm willing to grow. And when we're willing to share that with other people in a story, it is so empowering to other people. It's so helpful to them. I
I
want to go
also
back.
think that
Oh,
that is universal, don't you think, Jude? In other words, as your work as a therapist, but it feels like sometimes what we do is hide those vulnerabilities. But the reason someone said there was also a comedic element to it. And I think when we are able to lighten up and take ourselves a little bit less serious and realize, oh my gosh, everybody does this. Everybody's had a situation where they've forgotten something or they, messed up in some way, right? And we can start to
yes,
laugh at the human condition.
exactly. And when we are willing to be a little bit vulnerable and say, yeah, like this is one of my spots. I miss, for example, myself, I'm not good with details. I have many stories about the consequences of not noticing details or paying attention to them. And, I'm okay with that because it makes you more resilient to not this is one of the ways storytelling helps us overcome perfectionism, is that it is we'll get back to the PowerPoint in a second. It is the embrace of our flaws rather than running from them. It's the embrace of our quirks, the embrace of our mistakes. Then we no longer have to protect ourselves from them because we're looking at what is the muscle that developed in me because I made that mistake. And being a human being, we cannot cover all ground. We have to face, we just spend a lot of time protecting ourselves just from ourselves. So I want to share some here we're going to get into some techniques anybody can do in your own journaling, in your own life. Next slide, here we go. Mine your life for stories. So I don't know, in the time we have, okay. So for example, in your daily journaling, here's the a tip or sorry, a prompt that you could use. I used to be, for example, I'm just putting in parentheses, cynical, but now I am hopeful. Or I used to be very trusting, but now I am more discerning about people. So if you were to write, I used to be a true believer in a certain, orthodoxy of some kind, like somebody in a certain kind of mental health treatment, I don't know, then I had a bad experience with it. And now I'm more open-minded about other approaches. It's the I used to be that sets up the story for the ending, which is I'm transformed by some experience. That's one process to use. Another way, I'm the kind of person who, if you just start a paragraph with, I'm the kind of person who tends to, as an example, tends to think that see the good in people until they prove otherwise. Now, growing up in Wisconsin, this is a mandate. You have to believe that people are nice if you come from Wisconsin. And it was, I'm using myself just because I can. I have a million of my own stories. But I'm the kind of person who believes that people are good unless shown otherwise. And guess what? I was often shown otherwise because I wasn't very discerning and would trust people that had not earned my trust. If I went back to, if you take that same, I'm the kind of person who tends to think this, or I'm the kind of person who is very cynical about people. Now that's okay. And then you justify that with your own experience. And you may then find, but I've also come to see that some people, trust can be earned, and it's very nice to have people in your world that you can trust. In that struggle, in that shift is the story. Here's another one. I once believed, for example, if I treated people well, I would be treated well by others. And now I believe, for example, that being nice is not a substitute for having boundaries and speaking up for myself. So that's an example of I once believed this. Now I believe this. We'll want to know what happened in between believing that if I'm just nice to you, you'll be nice to me, and discovering, no, I actually have to be an adult and set boundaries. There's a story in that. And in that story can be comedy and definitely humanity. I want to, anybody have anything you want to share in there, Caroline, before we go to another slide? Or
Says in the chat, I love stories where the symbolism at the end is so clear and the narrator is so honest and vulnerable about her process of resolving her grief and moving forward. Thank you.
Oh, yeah.
And then we have, Deb was sharing, it says, I tried to live in New York, but ran into obstacles and escaped back to where I came from. Did I cop out? So there could be I once believed that, you know what I mean? In that, even
Okay.
that statement.
So let's take that for an example. It's completely open question. Nobody's telling anybody if they copped out. It could be that I once thought I would love living in New York, or that it would be a big success to live in New York. And now I realize it's not for me. It's
Right.
just not for me. It's in the process of getting from I used to be to who I am now is the story. And I framed this talk to be not necessarily that you have to go out and tell stories, because we're not getting into so much the the power, the craft of telling a story, but the how and the why of it. So that if you wanted to learn the craft, you'd say, oh yeah, I really do think that it would be interesting to flesh out this I used to be, but now I am, or I'm the kind of person who, or I used to believe something that now I believe differently. I would love to know how to share that in a way that is filled with interest and detail and confidence. And also because I coach a lot of people that just don't think they have any stories. So I crafted this for just everybody. So if you wanted to take 3 minutes right now, write a thesis statement. For example, write a thesis statement. And this is just an example. I'm not saying you have to use this one. Love comes when you are not looking for it. Or love comes because you're looking for it. Whatever thesis statement about love feels true, then you write a paragraph about something from your own life that proves it. We don't have to do that now, but if anybody feels moved to put it in the chat, a thesis statement, and then 2 or 3 sentences about something from your own life that proves it.
So a
Love.
thesis statement about love or a thesis statement
Well, let's
just in
pick
general?
love for today, but a thesis
Okay.
statement could be about anything. A thesis statement can be something like in the earlier slide, I'm a person who, a thesis statement could be, I'm a person who needs to stay up late at night to get any work done. And then support that with supporting information. And it's just a way of mining your own truth. But this one, we're looking for a little bit more of a philosophy. So say love comes because you're not looking for it, or love comes no matter when you're ready. Love comes when you're ready. That could be a thesis statement, and something from your own life that proves it. We can just return to that. Go
So
ahead.
I wrote, love is a revolutionary act.
Ooh, can you support that with 2 or 3 sentences from your own life that proves that thesis or supports it?
When I was upset during COVID with my husband's best friend because of a decision that he made, and we didn't speak for 2 years, it was love and my love for him when our dog passed away and he came by that enabled us to reunite and find common ground.
That's a very powerful, there's so much in that story. And it is a revolutionary act to just accept what has happened and come from love when you've been hurt. Yes.
Yeah. It was amazing. And the only way back for us was our love for one another from the hurt.
So you've got a beginning, a middle, and an end. A beginning could be like the stress you feel and the fraught thing about the pandemic, and what we need from people, the struggle, and then the ending, or it could be beginning and ending with love. But the love is a revolutionary act, gets supported by this struggle that ends with a revolutionary act that is loving.
Yeah. And it took the revolution happened from within. Right.
Right. So
And
that's a wonderful storytelling technique also, which I think there's another slide that gets into this a little bit, but that to go back and forth between our different inner monologues. Like part of me says I should think about the big picture. Part of me says, no, I've been hurt and I deserve, part of me says this, like all those, part of me says, no, I'm not having this. I'm always the pushover. Part of me says, I really want to I want harmony in my life and I want love and I want to be this person that can do this, a bigger person or whatever. And those conflicting monologues internally are very compelling in a story. And that's also how we humanize the struggle for anyone listening to it. And also listening to all parts of ourself is a resiliency strength. And that's one way to do it is that we might pick and choose what we end up sharing with other people, but we can be very open with ourselves.
it also
So,
seems like we're accessing our authentic self through story in a safe way, right? I might not have been willing to look or share with someone about that because there might have been some shame. Why would I be that kind of person that wouldn't forgive very easily or et cetera, et cetera. But through story, I can explore those back and forth narratives, right?
Yeah, well, it,
And
it
and
enriches
and
this. Yeah,
accept parts of myself that,
exactly.
right?
It's when we realize, and this is when we realize that to the listener, if we're writing a story as if someone's going to hear it, and we may never even get up and share it, right? But if we work on a story as if someone's going to hear it, we want to make this story as interesting as possible. We want to make all the dimensions of ourselves be part of it so that they really feel the struggle of it. Otherwise, the ending doesn't have a lot of meaning. Like Dorothy's return to home doesn't have the power unless we see everything she went through after leaving home. And so with this, it would be like how far removed we can get from who we want to be or who we thought we were through because we get hurt. All that journeying internally is part of what makes the story compelling and riveting to listen to. And even if we never end up sharing it with someone, we are now more aware of all those roads within ourselves. And you can feel it can be a self-healing and a self-growth and a self-embrace that is really a powerful thing. And then it does empower us also to want to tell other people about that struggle. I have a few more.
We just have
Sure.
one very compelling comment in the chat from
Okay.
Stephanie. Love doesn't know borders or boundaries. When I was a reporter in the Middle East, I fell in love with a Palestinian Christian journalist. We were alike in all of our interests, sense of humor, and quirkiness. Who would have thought I would meet the male version of myself in Amman?
Oh my gosh, there's so much in that
Gorgeous.
story. I oh my God, that's so powerful and beautiful. All I, well, I hope you will take a storytelling class with me, or with. I mean, I will be offering some, but with anyone, anybody who's interested in this, especially those of you who have shared some of those stories, because it is a very rich and wonderful process to go through, and then you might really be ready with something to share with people. Briefly want to tell a story about a person who influenced you. I'm going to do a very short version of one of my own and why this is a good intro storytelling approach. Because if we're sometimes people feel like they don't have a story, but everybody's been shaped by people and forces in our life. So sometimes people who influence us did so by not treating us well, but sometimes people influence us because they were a powerful role model or something. And telling their story could be something that you at some point can honor them. So I just want to tell briefly that one of my favorite people in the world was my Aunt Dorothy, my mother's only sister, who understood me as if she was my mom. And my Aunt Dorothy looked exactly like my mom. They were only 2 years apart. And they were two different sides of a coin, where my mom was very strict um, and and quite demanding. My Aunt Dorothy was funny and warm and flexible. They both had hundreds of children, no, 8, but many. And our families were totally different. But I always knew that my Aunt Dorothy got me, understood me, and was listening to me as if I was the only person in the room. And that just made me appreciate her so much because she was surrounded by people who wanted her attention and her love. But she lives in Dallas. When she was alive, lived in Dallas. I didn't see her very often, but she always knew everything that was going on in my life. In 1998, I had my debut of a cabaret act that I've been working on for 2 years, ever since I decided to give up on an infertility journey, which I have many stories about that as well. But I had given up on my infertility journey and decided that to do something that if I had a baby, I wouldn't be able to do, which was write and perform a cabaret act in New York City. It was just something I wanted to do. And I thought, I'll just do this wild thing that I was very afraid to do. And what I failed to do after booking a show that I worked on for 2 years was actually invite people to come and see it. It just got away from me that if I don't promote this thing, no one's going to come. And I was half relieved, and I've sabotaged it well enough that if no one comes, I don't ever have to do this again, because I got so terrified. And I also was just mortified that I spent all this time and money developing something and didn't really promote it. It was just a form of self-sabotage, a uniquely exquisite form of self-sabotage, not to invite people to come. And then it was at Daddy's Skylight Room on West 46th Street. And I did begin to tell people right at the last minute. And I arrived there just feeling such dread. What have I done? Why am I putting myself through this? This isn't going to fix my ache for a child. But I thought being creative would do it. And I get to Danny's Skylight Room, which has many different folks performing there. And I see on the grand piano in the cabaret space, a dozen roses in an empty room. And I say to the waiter, oh, somebody left their flowers here, the performer before me, because there was a show, right? There's a show every 2 hours there. They should take them. And he looks at the card and he said, oh, no, these are for you. And I say, really? Okay. And I look, and this dozen roses was from my Aunt Dorothy, who from Dallas, being a grandmom of 30 grandkids, half of them living with her, remembered that I had this debut performance in New York City and sent me a dozen roses. And there were more roses on that stage than there were people in the audience. And to be honest, that was 100% okay with me, because I felt so loved and so supported and so understood that even the way I was sabotaging myself by not inviting people, she somehow filled all those gaps. And I went on to do many more shows, but that kindness and that remembering of details about other people's lives is something that I took from her, and I try to incorporate and integrate into my own life. So I told that story at her funeral. And it meant so much to me to have something so specific about her influence on my life so many miles away. And we didn't even see each other that often. And I know it meant a lot to her children, but it meant so much to me to have something really special between her and I that I could share. And without storytelling training, I don't know that I would have thought that it was enough to have a specific memory like that. But it really is. It is enough to hone it down into the details of your specific contact with that person in one special way that they impacted you. So I wanted to share that. And then we're going to go on to that the story is in the details. So in the time that we have, I'm going to run through this, and then we're going to use the chat for hopefully some group interaction a little bit. So one way to find some of the stories that are right in front of you in your life right now are to describe your morning routine and break it down into simple little acts that you do pretty much without thought. So I thought, for me, a few. Get up, I drink 2 full glasses of water first thing. I feed my cat. I boil water for coffee because I always use a coffee press, and you have to boil water, and then you have to put the scoops of coffee in the coffee press, and then you add the boiling water to the coffee. Those are boring, mundane details about my particular little life. So I'm going to, next slide. So the story is in the details. This is in very small print, and I'm just going to describe it. So drink 2 glasses of water first thing in the morning. The why of that is the story. So one day I go for routine blood work, and my doctor can't look up at me, and she's absolutely stricken and panicked. And she says, you have a rare kidney disorder that has no symptoms, and I don't think it has any treatment. And I say, what are you talking about? I feel fantastic. I feel great. And she says, look at these numbers. Your kidneys are basically about to break down, and goes into this, what this illness is all about. And she makes me take another test while I'm there. My heart is racing. At the same time, I want another blood test. And being flooded with panic because she's panicked, and the emotional contagion is going back and forth. At the same time, there's a little intuition in me that says, just ask her if we can redo the blood work. And it turns out that I was just dehydrated. There was nothing wrong with my kidneys. So I always drink 2 glasses of water every morning because, one, I don't ever want to go through that again. But I also didn't realize just how dehydrated a person is when they wake up in the morning. And that that story is I've told that professionally a ton. but just about how one detail just has a whole like wealth of meaning for a person. Second, feed the cat. We just lost one of our cats, Dave. My remaining cat is a super control freak, wakes me up several times during the night to make demands that I do not understand because I do not speak cat, but they are mysterious and insistent. But I am compelled to try and figure it out and not give up and try to find what he wants and give it to him. And because when Dave died, this cat that we had for 16 years, and she just died recently, in journaling about this cat dying and the process of her illness, I realized how her pure, unconditional love that was steady and constant and perfect made up for a lot of family dynamics that were not like that at all. And I didn't realize how much that pure, unconditional love was holding me together until she was falling apart. So feeding my cat every day has a lot of story to it. It has a lot of meaning for me. And I know that's true for each of you. If you just take your morning routine and you write down 5 things that you do without fail, and then you write why you do those things, you might discover there's a story in there. It's in fleshing out those details that there's story to the coffee press too, but I don't need to get into all of that. Anybody have any comments in the chat, or Carolyn, anything you want to say
Yeah, we
on
had
the
a couple of comments. One was, wow, I wish there were more Aunt Dorothys in the world.
Me too. We have to try to be the Aunt Dorothys in the world.
Right.
I just
And
realized my presentation has a double Dorothy and Oz and my Aunt Dorothy.
yes, and then in relationship to Stephanie's story about falling in love with, when she was a reporter in the Middle East, there was a response of saying that I feel like it's healing to share the story, right? Stephanie, am I saying that correct?
Yes,
Yeah.
sorry. I want to was to take a class with you in storytelling.
Oh,
And
gotcha.
I feel that storytelling is a path to healing. So I'm really connecting, excuse me, with Jude and what you're saying as a therapist about telling stories.
That means I'm so glad to hear that. And it is such a fun and creative path to healing. And I look forward to hopefully us working on stories together.
Yeah, Jude and I are working on a class that we want to present. Jude, in that vein, we have a lot of people that have an illness, right? And how they tell the story about that illness is very impactful. And
Yeah.
I'm also thinking about, we're coming up on Memorial Day. It's hard to believe that it's going to be May, next week. And we're going to be with families. It seems like you could take some of these stories or some of these prompts for stories and maybe even have the family do something around the dinner table. I know you've done a bunch of stuff. How would you, those are two very different situations, right? Sort of how do we say kind of the medical narrative, or even in our own self, tell a story when we've had an illness or we're going through an illness, and then we have a family gathering. How do we create and not listen to someone's stories? We all know that sometimes there's one person that usually in our family that occupies.
Well, let's start with the medical narratives. First of all, I do want to say, and I could send some resources if you're interested, but there is a nice body of research about the medical world using true stories of people coping and dealing with an illness to provide community for people going through an illness or being introduced to having to go through a treatment or something. That storytelling true personal accounts of facing a medical diagnosis and possibly a chronic illness and things like that, life-changing medical issues, just sharing the human side of that is very helpful to the listener. So in crafting our own story about a medical narrative, that mindset that Carolyn was talking about earlier is critical, because there's suffering and there's who we are before we face this suffering, who we are during the suffering, and who we are as a consequence of facing this. And sometimes just sharing about it and knowing that we are shining a light on how hard it is, or on some of the ways that people showed up for us, or how the muscle that we found, the psychological muscle that grew, or the dreams we had to let go of and what that's like. There are so many human sides to going through medical issues and illnesses that you can tap into in a creative way. And telling the story, once we learn the craft of it, is always enlightening and illuminating to the listener about a human experience, which illness absolutely is. I strongly encourage people to write through any kind of illness and to reflect on who I am as a result of this. Both what am I suffering through, and what am I struggling through, and what muscles and strengths am I discovering through this thing I never asked for.
Beautiful. And what about a family gathering?
That's interesting. I once did a storytelling slam at a family reunion. It's funny that you should bring this up, because it was a mixed bag, but it's kind of like an open mic where people might up telling stories about you. So I think you have to know your audience. You have to know whether it's safe. Like some groups, it'd be fantastic. And sometimes you have to set guidelines. Stories about your favorite birthday, stories about your least favorite birthday, stories about the first time you broke a family rule. Sometimes having a guideline like that could be fun. And, also, if people tell a story, the thing you will discover through family storytelling is that you can all go through the same experience and have a very different narrative about it. You can have very different narratives about your parents and about each other. One strength that I think comes from working on our own stories is that we know ourselves better. And if somebody else defines something, a narrative of a family dynamic that we just don't buy, we just don't think that's the way it happened, we might be a lot less defensive about it if we have our own idea and we go, well, I really do see it this way, and I have my own perspective on it, and not necessarily feel like we can change their point of view, because people have their own narrative about things. So I think it depends on your audience. It really depends on a group dynamic. I'll just use my own family and my Aunt Dorothy. My Aunt Dorothy has many children, and they are very tight. They're very close. So even though they might say, that's not how that happened, it's going to be in a loving, mutually supportive way that somebody goes, wait, I remember this about that day. Other families, and my family is one of them, we have very differing narratives, even definitions of things that happen. And it's not a fight, it's just different. We just had a different structure to our family. And knowing that you're not going to be as thrown if that's if people have a very different definition of how things happened. But
That's so
self-knowledge
helpful.
helps a lot with that. I'm sorry,
And
Carolyn. Go ahead.
and Jude, what would you say in terms of storytelling and positive psychology that you have, and even your improv work that you've done, and how you weave that in and how one influences the other?
The most powerful thing we can do as a human being is be our authentic self. And Martha Graham said, there's only one you in all of time. There's only ever going to be one you in all of time. So your job, if you will, your responsibility in this life is to be fully that person as you are. And some of who you are potentials that are hidden by fears and defenses. And those fears and defenses are from injury. They're from hurt. They're from being misunderstood. They're from being self-abandonment. So through I'll talk about improv in a moment, storytelling, I'll back into it. Through improvisation, for example, we're encountering uncertainty and the unknown with other people, using a set of rules and structures as to how we're going to interact with each other. And we're going to encounter our defenses, our fears, and all the ways that we protect ourselves, but in a very loving and kind community. And when we come to realize I don't need to protect myself in order to be and come across as perfect. I don't need to protect myself by coming across with answers and having this kind of armored up problem solved. I've got the answers. But as a person who arrived at self-discovery through all kinds of inner negotiations and letting go of things that we thought were true and really facing all those human realities internally, we're so much more authentically ourselves because we've earned it. And that really is the hero's journey, the classic hero's journey, going from Shakespeare to Seinfeld to the Greeks, is a person has a quest and they have obstacles and mentors and allies and challenges, and we have to let go of an old way of thinking to embrace the new. Well, storytelling and improv both attack those, but in very different ways. Well, let's not use the attack, approach them. I shouldn't say the word attack. Approach those challenges in very different ways. As I said, improv is about creating in the now and facing our defenses and our self-protection and letting go of those in order to do something new. And storytelling is about understanding what has already happened so that we can be our authentic self. And it is the most powerful way to deal with our perfectionism, our fear of failure, our fear of looking like a flawed person, by embracing our flaws and making them part of something funny and universal and true for all of us. I hope that
Beautiful.
answers your question. That's the
Yeah.
therapeutic side for real. Yeah.
You know, Jude, I just can't thank you enough. The hour went by like that, you know, right, everyone? And I just could spend a lifetime with you. And, you know, anytime that we do, I just learned so much. And today I learned the power of simple everyday actions and how there is detail in that and there's a story in that. It never occurred to me to write down like 5 things that I do in my morning and then look at the story, even as a journal prompt, you know, for me to get to know myself
Yeah.
better. Sometimes we get into the habit and we get a little unconscious, right?
Yeah.
About what we're doing.
We
So
forget
I
the
love
why
this.
is a part of who we are. Go ahead. Sorry.
Right. Yeah, no. I think that's amazing. Loved this. It's the road to healing and growth. Says Stephanie. Deb said, thank you. Reminds me of Larry David, our Curb Your Enthusiasm. I'm learning that Mega says, Mom, Mega's in the house. I'm learning that my love for improv is trouncing my fear of it. Great. Oh, and this fearless love is massively due to Jude, who is the bee's knees of improv teacher ever, the best improv teacher ever. Every week I am given such a great gift from her. Oh my, such a polished apple for my teacher. So Jude, when we send out the recording, we'll send information out about your improv classes. We are working, Jude and I, on a storytelling class, which is different than improv. We hope that you guys might consider it, and we'll keep you up to date about that. Jude, thank you.
Thank you
Thank you
all.
so
Thank
much.
you so much, Carolyn. Thank you.
And we'll see you next time. Take care.
Okay.